Welcome to the Crypto Compliance Podcast by Gatenox.
Pawel Kuskowski, welcome in Crypto Compliance by Gatenox, where compliance experts and practitioners are talking about current market events and general compliance aspects. We do this to promote compliance in crypto, bringing interesting topics. I would like to ask you to like our podcast, comment it, share it, and subscribe to our channel. Let's together promote compliance culture in crypto and Web3. Today, I'm here with Magnus Jones. Magnus is Nordic Blockchain Innovation Lead at EY and EY Global in the EY Global Metaverse team. He is very experienced in crypto, NFT, DAO, assisted Norwegian tax authorities on creating the world's first guidance on how to tax NFTs and also DeFi. He co-founded the Norwegian Computer Science Group for Blockchain, Oslo Blockchain Cluster. He is the advisor to the United Nations Working Group for Crypto and Counterterrorism. On 20th of April 2023, the European Parliament gave its final blessing to the new markets in crypto assets regulation called MiCA. MiCA forms part of the EU broader digital financial package, which includes the Digital Operation Resilience Act and the pilot regime on the distributed ledger technology. We will be talking about MiCA, what it is about, and whether it helps Europe to grow its crypto businesses or not, or if there are some segments of the economy which are going to be winning because of MiCA. Please check our website, gatenox.com. Gatenox is the fast, network, and tailored corporate KYC solution. With Gatenox, you can onboard corporate clients by working in a trusted and compliant ecosystem with Web3 capabilities. Hi, Magnus.
Hi, Pawel.
Great to have you here. Magnus, you are Nordic Blockchain and Innovation Lead in EY, and we know each other for many, many years. And I think, from my perspective, you are one of the few people I know in the big four companies who actually run, they have such a long history of innovation and working with crypto, metaverse, as you are. So tell me your story.
Yes, first of all, thanks for the invite, Pawel. And yes, I go some years back. I started the Norwegian blockchain department of EY back in 2015, simultaneously as EY also officially went into blockchain from a tech perspective. So we've been working quite some years within this landscape. So it's everything from the tax and legal side, where we do core company structuring, towards legal opinion on tokens, SAFT agreement, white paper reviews, smart contract audits from also the legal side, not only the technical side. We have fraud forensic investigators. We have, the classic auditing, bookkeeping part, interpretation, how to actually classify the attributes of these tokens. So we literally do, A to Z of this landscape. So we work with everything from 1-2 persons who go straight into our DAO structure. We support and assist DAO foundations, towards small, medium, large entities who wants to trace a banana from A to B, towards assisting some of the world's largest corporates, like Nike, Adidas, all of them on their Web3 journey, in addition to also assist the governments. So I'm also, among others, part of the Interpol's expert group on metaverse, and also an advisor to the counterterrorism crypto group for the United Nations. So we also work heavily on the government side, in addition to academia, of course, also. So it's literally A to Z and never a boring day at work.
Yeah, it seems like, it's a huge scope. So listen, we have a big landmark right now, right? Regulatory landmark. And you've been involved quite heavily, to my knowledge, with MiCA. And, I also, as part of my, previous role, I was part of the INADBA. So also involved on this side. So right now, on the 20th of April, the EU Parliament approved the market in crypto assets regulation, MiCA, right?
Yes.
And MiCA forms part of the EU broader digital financial package, which includes the Digital Operation Resilience Act and the pilot regime on the distributed ledger technology. So I think, this is interesting to talk to you about MiCA itself, but also, in this broader context. But just before we jump into this, what's your view on the regulations in general? And I have a funny, meme almost like, which is, traveling across social media, where in terms of leadership, we have China, US, and Europe, and China is leading in advanced batteries, commercial drones. US is leading in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, fusion energy, and Europe is leading in regulations, right?
Yep.
So that's something that we are. So what's your view in general on the regulations, like from your perspective?
No, I think just as you say, it has at least been a quite, call it, hyped momentum in terms of fronting Europe as the leading area for crypto legislation. And that's just because we picked up the pace on the legislation there in terms of the MiCA. However, what we should also take into concern there is that, MiCA per se is not meant to, or the founding ideas was not to regulate the current market. What it arose out of was actually the ICO market in 2017. That's when we had the first initial steps there. So lots of people are forgetting that in 2018, we had actually the first proposal for a regulation on both crowdfunding and ICOs specifically. That came out in August 2018. But at that time, they didn't manage to fully understand what is an ICO, what to fit in. It was way too complex. And luckily, thank God, they didn't rush that one. So having said that, we should take into concern that this industry, as you know, it evolves so rapidly fast.
Yeah.
There's new thing popping up all the time. So down to the cliche that technology always moves faster than the regulators. It will still be like this, even though we have now, call it, a better framework within the MiCA, that we try to set some corners, but we are far away from having all four corners written down in stone. And now it's just go ahead. But of course, in terms of the momentum that MiCA creates, I think it will facilitate a better certainty for specifically the financial actors, the banks, institutions that either wants to offer services or products with regards to crypto, because then they feel more safe and assured. And of course, we will have more clarity on several areas. However, as mentioned, MiCA will not bring clarity to all areas. It's definitely things up for also interpretations and also things that will be slightly out of or inside the scope. So yes, we have a good framework. We have come very much longer than any other jurisdictions per se, but we can also look into specific areas, whether or not that's Singapore, or if it's Switzerland or others, who also have a framework which is very workable. But still, in general, I would say, yes, there's a focus, and the focus will be increasing. And as we can touch briefly upon, there's several other areas that will also affect the crypto industry, not MiCA alone per se, but lots of other frameworks coming in that regulates and give guidance in terms of whether or not you're on an exchange, or if you're on the banking side, or you're in the investing side. So yeah, it's good to see that we see some movement at least, and Europe is for sure in that matter leading the way.
So let's talk a little bit about the entire package, right? Which was accepted. There is also regulations which kind of implement what's called travel rule. Right.
Yeah.
It's effectively, it's a US name for whenever you are making transfer, you need to add beneficiaries and send their information, KYC information attached to the transaction, which was, heavily discussed. I remember this discussion since 2017.
Yeah.
FATF, discussion. So there's big, and I think this is big change, and it's going to be really interesting to see, because I think at the end the peer-to-peer transaction was carved out from this, right?
Indeed, and the TFR, as it was called, that was voted on the same day as you mentioned on as the MiCA, the transfer of funds. Well, it's the idea is very good in terms of the KYC part and the AML part of it, and it also includes, the suggestion that transactions above €1,000 from so-called unhosted wallets, that means wallets hosted by private users, should then, when they interact with the hosted wallets managed by crypto asset service providers, that is also included there. So it means you need to keep track of the whole flow and the history of where the crypto has come from. And that, of course, is naturally going to lead as the start, call it immediately, for exchanges to some administrative burden, will lead to increased costs whatsoever. So it's down to, I think, here finding the balance, because lots of the exchanges that we have talked to and that we are in dialogue with, which are our clients, they want to just be compliant immediately. Whether or not that's Norwegian ones or other ones, they do not want to sit around and wait, because they understand, just like you have to be in front of the landscape. You have to be on edge. You cannot just sit still and say, well, we will cope with this in 2 years. No, they want to stay ahead. So thereby, when these rules are introduced, it is a burden that goes over on the industry as well. So we should call it that in concern in terms of how fast one is applying rules, whether or not it should be an intermediate period or how we do it. And I also think, to a perspective there, that this is down to one of your core areas, Pawel, as well. But on the KYC part versus the KYT of knowing the customers or the transaction, and that's also a thing that we discuss a lot with governments with regards to everything in this landscape is per se traceable, because it's ones and zeros. So it's also down to how you should put a burden on someone, whether or not you should be able to identify the persons per se, or just be able to stop the transactions. And that's an important element, I think, that lays down to the mechanisms of DeFi, the decentralized finance, and which is a very important element in general to be discussed there. Do we apply, call it legislation that is outdated, or how to update and live with it? And that's a fine balance. So I think the TFR will lead to lots of fuss and hassle in the start. People will be forced to adapt to it, sort of saying. So it will come into place, but it will naturally come with the cost also. So it's down to where, three of the main pillars, call it, that is surrounding the framework of MiCA or the digital finance package that you mentioned, because MiCA is, as said, just a small piece of the puzzle there. That is to, one, protect what I call the stupid consumers out there, so they not live into stuff, and also protect professional investors. And the second one is to ensure financial stability in the markets. But the third one is also to drive innovation. And I think that's a very important element here, to not then enforce, call it, understand me wrong, to strict rules immediately. So people are saying, well, fine to have all these rules, but we still cannot fit it into our product. We have to go out of Europe. We have to restrict. No one from Europe is allowed to purchase our products in the same way that we have standard in our terms and conditions now on almost all projects due to the noise in the US. US purchases are not allowed into this project, period. And that's the fine balance we need to find on this one. So the TFR, I see lots of fuss coming up as the start, but I think over time it will lead to more, call it, transparency in general. So we're positive towards it, but we should also separate them between KYC and KYT also, I think. That's very important.
And just the feedback which I am getting, that's constantly getting from the market, especially from the DeFi part of the market is like, oh, we're not able to comply, right? We're not able to, and like frankly, I agree to the point, because I think there's a framework that actually we are preparing in Gatenox. We are preparing the paper on how to actually put in place framework for compliant DeFi, right, without actually impacting UI, UX, and like client onboarding, all this stuff. And that's funny. So what you hear from the clients? I mean, you mentioned your large exchanges, centralized exchanges. We want to comply immediately. What about DeFi market? Are they worried, or they just say, oh, like we don't care?
No, I think in general, my perception is that most players that we are connected to within DeFi, and not only that we are directly connected to towards our clients, but the people we meet at all different events and arrangements, they are there and they want to be compliant, even though they are within DeFi. So there's more a presentation around it, that they want to pay their taxes, they want to pay the employment fees, they want to do stuff correctly, but they sort of need to find a balance towards their market. So it's about the timing. And of course, if they didn't want to be compliant, they could always go on to whatever hot island it is, use hidemyass.com and all sorts of VPN solutions, and always stay 2-3 steps ahead of the governments. That's also possible regardless of crypto or not. It's where there's concentration of volumes of money, there will also be illicit activity. So that's not specific for this industry. But back to the DeFi thing, I think what we see is, if you take one example of rewinding a couple of years, when FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, gave out their crypto guidance, that they said, more or less, you need full AML, full KYC checks on all people dealing with DeFi products.
Yeah.
And the idea and the mindset is good. And Estonia was the first country in the world who strategically, the day before Christmas Eve, introduced those rules to keep the noise down. So take that example. We are assisting, among others, several, like I mentioned, DEXs, DAO-related startups. And we had 2 Norwegian ones who is, they have created a DEX, a decentralized exchange. And they wanted to go to Estonia to establish in there, because it seemed like a good foundation and element. But since these rules more or less came in overnight, they were introduced only by 2 months. They were in there. That meant that, well, they want to do everything correctly, otherwise they wouldn't have come to us. But still, like they say, our customers out there per se, they are not used to the mindset of either having a KYC check when you use a DEX or a KYT per se. So thereby, they said, we would just kill our product if we were to do this overnight. We have to do it slowly, more over time, to mature the whole market. So they decided, well, we're not going to Estonia. We're staying in Norway so far. And what I've told these guys from day one, regardless of if you believe in DeFi and decentralized finance, and we also at EY, from the official point of view, we believe in the mechanisms of DeFi, that is the future of finance. But still, there's so much noise in the DeFi market right now. That's down to there's way too many fat fingers in the code. It's a very small community. DeFi users, unique DeFi users per month on average is only 500,000 people globally. So it's very small, lots of, call it insider trading, lots of products that can be built on top of each other, not a default error in the smart contract per se, but you are building solutions that can drain liquidity pools out of the blue. So lots of risk surrounding it. So what these guys were doing, they were succeeding in terms of that market, because lots of people think it's anonymized and whatnot. But I told them from day one, if you guys want to build a product, you want to grow this one, you also have to have a bank account, because you have to pay our bills, your accountant's bills, otherwise. And we managed to get a bank account for them in the largest bank in the Nordics. And the pre-sale, the founding was all fine. But then the bank started to ask questions about, guys, you're running a DEX. Who is trading there? And you put the benefits into that one. You get that one in USDC Tether. You send it to Norwegian Block Exchange. You exchange it to Norwegian crowns. Send it back to the bank. Is that money laundering? Where does that money come from? So I told them from day one, you have to have some kind of AML routines and checks with this one. So to solve this one right now, we just said, well, you need something quick here. They went for chain analysis. So within 2 days, I said, you now have to bust your developers, put it into place. So they have put it in, even though that the users don't can see it directly. Yeah. So it means that the chain analysis is in there. They stop and they trace all transactions from the wallet before they are executed. So if you want to carry out a transaction and you have, for example, i.e., a coin that has been through a tumbler, a mixer service, it's instantly stopped, so we cannot execute the transaction. And then the bank was like, okay, so you're doing this step, you are stopping this one. Now it makes sense. Now we can actually allow you to have a bank account there. So what I see is within this landscape that I think we'll see a shift. I think we'll see that the serious actors who is building the mechanisms, as said, as the finance system of the future, they will apply these kind of services and measurements, not overnight a KYC. Hey, you want to use the DEX, you have to identify yourself with the Coinbase photo of your driving license, but rather see the KYT part here. And slowly over time, maybe we will have different verification mechanisms. But that's the first step at least. So I think also, as we see MiCA comes in place, as we briefly said, institutional investors, they are then saying, now we feel we have a framework. We can do this legally. We can actually invest in crypto assets. And then if you're using a DeFi mechanism and you have invested in some kind of a DeFi token, whether that's a governance token or other specific token relating to DeFi, and you as a professional investor, whether or not that's you as a private person or as an institution or a bank, you are then using an accountant, a bookkeeper, or an auditor. And your auditor, the accountant, or the bookkeeper will go in and say, hey, we see these tokens that you have in the portfolio. Where do these originate from? Oh, do they originate from case A and B within DeFi? Oh, they are AML compliant. Okay, these one we can accept, but the other ones, they are listed here as, call it, illicit. So I think for these kind of purposes that the market in general, that is going to raise the volume and increase the DeFi market from being only 500,000 users, that will come from the institutional and corporate side. So thereby, they will be forced to do just as these guys I mentioned. And thereby, we will always see some degens who will say, hey, crypto, we can always stay ahead. No problem. No one will catch us. We'll go grey dark market. We will create new platforms, new setups, F off everyone. We don't care. That's just as in the real world. So I think we will see the shift coming in, that you will see a split in the market there. And in the same way that we will see in the NFT market, where naturally there's no obvious reason why an NFT market platform should be treated different than a crypto platform. And they don't need AML and KYC. And in the same area, gray shift, the ones that wants to do this illegally, fine, they think they can do it, they will be traced down, they will be caught, there's no way around it, it's ones and zeros, it is traceable. So the split will come there. So I think we'll see more and more compliance coming into the DeFi side, and ironically, that what I call everything that starts with a D now, whether or not that's DeFi, DAO, dApps, whatnot, it's not decentralized per se. There's physical human beings, there's link and reference towards physical persons, it's administrated by physical persons, and that's what we will see of more and more of the regulation and the compliance side coming up there as well. So I think people in general should wake up and not have, call it, the anarchistic mindset of freedom, that DeFi is the solution to everything. So yes, I clearly foresee that AML, KYC is also coming into then the mechanism of DeFi, and whether or not we have to call it something else than decentralized finance. I think we all here who's deep into this one understand that we're talking about still the mechanism of DeFi, but a hint of centralization and an element that has to be there. So whether or not that's Reg DeFi or RegFi or whatever we call it, that's the way to go forward as far as I see it.
That's exactly my thinking as well. The interesting part, we don't see this yet, right? And when you see the top 10 exchanges, they're all in Cayman, Bahama, and I think Coinbase is the only one which is struggling to keep up in first 10, frankly. So it's the only one. So when you think about this in this way, it's like kind of okay, like the market, it's telling differently, right? But coming to MiCA, right?
Yeah.
So interestingly, I think let's start with the assets which are, let's say, laid out, and I think this is the starting point for MiCA, right? Then you have the assets, then you have the players or the regulated entities and the requirements which goes after this, right? So we have the ART, which is the assets reference tokens, e-money tokens, and other assets such as utility tokens and other cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin and Ether. Interesting, right? And my surprise, and there was surprise for me from the beginning when we work on this, is that the ART, which should be the easiest to issue and the easiest to transfer, actually the burden for them is equal to e-money, which is, frankly speaking, wrapping up money into a token, right?
Yeah.
So what you think? I think this is wrong, because that's effectively really going to be killing the art market. I mean, it's going to be very difficult to establish. I don't know, simply speaking, NFT for any NFT which you want to issue, which is reference to physical assets, or even not physical, digital as well, right? You need to have compliance officer. You need to be, registered. You need to. It's not notification, registration, all this stuff. And I think this is something which went completely wrong.
Indeed, and just to add to like you said on the asset reference tokens, the R tokens, that's also then where you have a specific collection of several ordinary currencies like fiat currencies or other assets you can put in gold or cryptos or whatever.
So that's going to be art, right? If you collect, not the e-money.
Yes, exactly. So that's when you have the specific collection of several ones.
Right.
And on the e-money, that's when you have one, just to bring clarity to the viewers. And also on the last one, to bring clarity there, utility tokens, because I received lots of questions from core degens within the market. And I said, utility tokens? Bitcoin? That's not a utility token. No, sorry, from the old wording in the crypto industry, no, Bitcoin is not a utility token, but the EU has classified them as utility tokens in general, all of those. That's also an element of misinterpretation that can be arised out there of it, but like you said, on the example of the NFT market, also that's a challenge there, because they have said in general, and that's down to what I briefly started to talk about initially, that lots of people believe that MiCA right now is covering all the struggle and the hassle that we see, all the challenging part, what we talked about just with DeFi, of the NFTs, of the DAOs, and everything like this that is moving. But it's not. It's actually built and created just to protect consumers and investors from the ICO bubble, sort of thing. That's why they are so strict on having the sections on what is written in the white paper, the issuer, a large percentage of the token you can keep, etc. All the struggle we had back in those times. And then in the last minutes, people have been trying to just throw in this element. Like you said, no, NFTs, we see lots of fuss in this market. What's all with these CryptoPunks and these apes and all these things popping up? They're suddenly worth millions. They're volatile. What is this one? And then they try to just fit it in. So has been back and forth with NFTs specifically. And they originally wanted to do a larger framework for NFTs. While then they said, no, we're not including NFTs. It's way too complex. Let's rather take that in the next round on the MiCA 2. And that's also something on the side that people should be aware of, that we will see a MiCA 2 and 3 maybe coming up very soon in terms of covering DeFi and DAOs and NFTs and whatnot. But on the NFT side here, they have said that fractional parts of a unique and non-fungible crypto asset should not be considered unique and non-fungible. And they also said, I think, the issuance of a crypto asset as non-fungible tokens in a large series or collection should be considered an indicator of their fungibility. That means that if you have a large collection or a series, that can be included in the framework of MiCA. So it's all down to here that lots of people are saying, no, NFTs are not covered. Oh, large collection. Yeah, what is a large collection? That has not been defined yet. But still, as you also said, can that be fit within other asset classes there as the art tokens? And yes, it can. So it's call it the classic boring legal answer. It all depends. And it's a case-by-case matter verification that you need to look into. So that's down to that. What I said, that this is not a static market, and an NFT is not equal to another NFT. And I've had so many talks together with the European Commission and all of these one who has been in charge of the MiCA. And I was just recently just before Christmas over there in Brussels and discussed with them. And it's quite fascinating where they believe that, oh, an NFT is just an NFT. When I told them, well, we have different attributes, the token classes, they can act and deal with it in a different kind of way. And you know what? An NFT can change attributes over time. It might look like an art token now or whatever it might be, but then it can get new attributes. So we have to then always take into consideration and a verdict around what is this animal? What is the attributes? And that is the key thing, and also why we have been allowed from, call it the EY system, to give advice since 2015. We're not doing as many politicians seems there, just taking a finger in the air and say, oh, we believe it's like this. No, we go in, look into the specific attributes and say, hey, because of this and this, it's clearly not a financial instrument. But because of this and this, it might be VAT. And because of this and this, it can maybe be treated as this one if it gets another attribute into it. And that's just down to, say, the example of you issue a ticket. What is that? An NFT ticket. Smells like a ticket, acts like a ticket, looks like a ticket, most likely is a ticket, but still it's a token. So for tax purposes, it's totally different if you just sell that one with a gain as a private person. That's one thing. But also, it acts like a ticket. You use the token, you scan the QR code, but you still have the NFT. Oh, is that suddenly now a collectible? Yes, it is. You have the first ticket to the Woodstock. It has a value over time, maybe. Or if someone says you collect 5 tickets, we will give you access to a real backstage tour at our concert. Or we will send you a physical t-shirt, or even we will send you a new NFT t-shirt, or give you access to our metaverse solution for our band. Then you see you have so many different attributes that can be fitted into this token that suddenly looked like something on day one and maybe was outside the scope of MiCA. But when they put different attributes into it on day 2 or 20 or 200, it can then become an animal that lives within the framework of MiCA. And that's why you have to be very cautious and understand what you are creating here. And that's the trouble side of having the balance between, the regulation part and the innovation part. So I think what people in general should think about here, unfortunately, is that going forward, even though we have MiCA, you will need more and more and more advices that can ensure that you actually are compliant, because the framework is not for sure 100% clear. So that's also, as said, AML, KYC will be the 2 main issues that you need to take care of. And then we will have to fit this one, as MiCA will also be interpreted over time. Right now, it is not. There are EU institutions that, according to the papers now, will give guidance on different aspects. So the timeline is more or less that right now, MiCA, the text of MiCA is going to be officially incorporated into something called the official journal within the EU. And after 20 days, then it's formally into action. So it means that over time here, we will see that MiCA, right now, we don't know 100% how to interpret all of these aspects, but for sure it will also be uncertainty going forward. So yes, the compliance side will for sure be a key element of doing tokenized projects, and also what you briefly mentioned about quality administrative burdens, I think is an element that shouldn't be forgotten here, that there are now, because of MiCA, that you have to register with a national competent authority with your product to hand in your white paper, to hand in the information about the product, to hand in information about the token, the classifications, and then you have, call it a one-stop shop. So you can then use it all over EU in all EU countries. That's very good. So you have one stop, one place to register, and then you can passport it, as it's called, to all of the EU jurisdictions. So we don't have to, like today, go with local financial authorities in all jurisdictions. That's fine. But still, they will take an administrative fee. And that administrative fee has been suggested up to 20, 30, 40,000 euros. We don't know sure yet. But
for each country, which is...
No, for one stop shop. But still, for a startup, 20, 30, 40,000 euros, that's lots of money. So they naturally don't have this money as the start normally. And that can also lead to that people are saying, well, right now we're just restricting EU market, we're restricting US market, we go to Vietnam or whatever, we do the developers, we do everything from there anyway, and build it from there. So we can see, ironically, the part, I think, of MiCA also, that the ones that wants to build new products, who is not funded well enough also as the start, there the EU can lack out that the company will not be then registered in the EU. You will lack out of the employment fees, all the other taxes that will create. And you can see hubs of concentrations where development is done from other places than the EU, ironically. So that's also where we need to find a balance between the innovation part and how much, call it, start burden it's supposed to be in the system compared to what you do over time. But that's naturally EU thinking, the natural side. Someone has to pay for the bureaucracy. That's how it's built. It's EU laws in a nutshell. So that's also what will be applied there. So again, yes, for the ones who wants to build something from the EU, be prepared for administrative burdens and compliance. That's the way. If you manage to deal with that, you can easily succeed all over Europe. That's a fine thing. So it's positive for this side. But as the startup with not that much of funding, can be a challenge.
Yeah, and I think there's proof of initial capital, right? 350,000 if you are art issuer. Yep. White paper, legal opinion that the art is an art, not nothing else, right? So that's, and I tell you, I have a lot of friends and a lot of advisors in the UK, right? And they say, all of them, they say, thanks God we don't have MiCA, right? And that's gonna be really interesting, because I think UK, they position themselves right now as kind of, we're just gonna look at the consumer aspect. The rest will be so easy. And I see this happening, right now. I don't know if you saw this, but there was this consultation run by HMRC. Yeah, exactly. And that's something that, I don't know if you participated, but, I saw some responses, and that's really, really interesting. And so very curious, what's going to happen.
Absolutely. No, I think they have also been a little forward-leaning in terms of they sent out the request also HMRC for DeFi also. What do you think about it? Yeah. How should this be handled? They try to shape it into that kind of direction also. So it's definitely a market that will be interesting to follow. But again, also it's not necessarily inexpensive to use our legal advices in London or the UK either. So it's down to finding the balance there, and that's what we see that from, call it, the volatility that is in the industry. It's a tough one necessarily to be able to. You want to do the compliance, but it's so many different interpretations. And it also regardless of we are, call it consultants, as we live by hourly billable hours sort of saying, we see it not as beneficial. We don't want to be there to just bill the hours. We want to help the industry to grow. We want to build this landscape together. And then it's just insane if we are to spend X amount of literally months on a client of something that should be a one-stop click application that should be able to deal with in 30 minutes by yourself. And that's where I think we need some more certainty quite swift. Otherwise, as said, we can see that the industry in itself are moving to different jurisdictions, definitely.
Yeah. And it's funny, when I look at the MiCA and looking at how it was developed, it's kind of a combination of MiFID, Transparency Directive, and Prospectus Directive, right?
Yeah.
And you have the white paper, which, frankly speaking, it's effectively prospectus, right? It's just named differently. We don't know why actually it's called, white paper. Why they couldn't just simply say prospectus, because it's one to what you want to achieve in the prospectus, right?
and that's as said, down to that this origin actually that many people don't know. It originated from the proposal in 2018, and that when we had the ICO market that was totally out of control, then it was the white paper that was the hot stuff. And that was sort of the business plan and why they refer to it. So there's lots of things that goes back to that in the MiCA.
Yeah. And my concern, I spent a lot of time when, and actually was working with the EU at some point on the MiFID and MAD, right? Market Abuse Directive. And in my opinion, MiFID is complete failure. Right? MiFID is complete failure. I don't think it's actually created anything which was supposed to create. There's nothing which was kind of, we didn't build better financial market, better, secondary markets, internalizers, we didn't create more transparency on the market. Nothing like this happened, and I'm very, very worried that we're gonna have the same with MiCA, right? When I see, look at this, it's very, very similar to what happened there, right?
Indeed, and as we briefly touched upon now as well, I think we see lots of call it administrative hassle around the whole thing, uncertainty, unclarity around it, and also given the fact that the landscape is moving so fast in terms of their own development. So, like I said, on the first proposal that came out for a regulation on ICOs and crowdfunding in 2018, it was so specifically down into the text about the different elements, what it was supposed to cover. So it was clearly the ICO, the initial coin offerings that were to be covered. That's by some private party taking the initiative to create their own shitcoin and issue that one and all of that. Well, what would have happened there if they had agreed to that regulation and just implemented it? It would have been outdated just by 3 months. Because, in the 2018 market, something new came up. It's not called ICOs, it's called IEO, Initial Exchange Offerings.
Yeah.
Same shit, new wrapping as we call it in Norwegian. And that's the irony that IEOs wouldn't even have been covered by that regulation then. Yeah. So then it would be totally outdated. And I think that's also a part that one should take into consideration now in terms of how specific it wants to be, like this is DeFi or this is a DAO or this is an NFT. There's no such thing because the industry, as I said, is growing so fast and evolving. That's why I think it's very important, like ESMA already said it back in 2019, that we need better technology neutral laws. And that's down to, I'm not against a framework of something here, but I think it's very important that we're not too narrow down on the specification of the different token classes, which is currently now, because someone is creating new token classes every day. That's the innovation part of this one. And also the mechanisms of DeFi that is being developed. So there, I think it's also important for governments to understand, call it the irony part where they all mix up all things, and that's down to blockchain is the same as Bitcoin, that is the same as some anarchists that some criminals is using, so we don't like this. But the blockchain technology we like. I'm so for the blockchain technology, the mechanisms behind this horrible Bitcoin thing. And if we just apply and think a little bit about a good, updated, relevant example, and that's in Norway now, where the Norwegian central bank has had a test pilot for their CBDC.
Yeah, exactly.
So they had a test phase 4 now, where they have had a hackathon running from September last year until January. And there they have created a token based upon Hyperledger Besu. So they issued also then, even though Hyperledger is a private blockchain, they issued they can use the version that is compatible with ERC20 tokens. So for the test pilot, they issued ERC20 tokens as the CBDC.
Do they have white paper on this?
Yeah, yes, they do. No, they actually do have quite good documentations around this one, and they're actually issuing a report that will come out either now in June or in August. So it will be interesting reading. And the thing is also that not many people knows that the Norwegian Business Entity Register, they have said, we believe that our business registers, how they are built and created today, is not sustainable at all. They will never scale. So they have created and put as the test the shareholder, the stock register of Norway, onto the public mainnet of Ethereum, not a private one, not the public mainnet, because they said, if we are building this solution, it has to be open for everyone. It has to be open for Sweden, for UK, for Uganda, for that matter of sake. But it also has to be public available for all users, instead of everyone making their own Excel spreadsheets and reporting in who is the owners of the stocks. We have to build it in this kind of way. They immediately understood it. So the funny thing here is, when we did this hackathon now, is that you see, we have a CBDC, which is on ERC20 level. That talks exactly the same language as the business entity register, who also brought in their pilot. Everything is on the blockchain. So regardless of which ERP system you are using, when all the banks and private actors was also in the hackathon, they could easily connect to the joint railway that was on top, which is the blockchain. So you have the triangle of the banks, the CBDC side, and also the business register. So thereby, they could use a CBDC to pay for an update in the business entity register. That works. And then they also understood, what if we are to also use our privately issued stablecoin in some kind of way? It can be a USDC, a Tether, can be whatnot. And when they understood, we can use this element, this railway of infrastructure, and if needed, we could also use Ether here, or other types of tokens, then they understand this is quite a good and useful railway that we have created. And suddenly we have different asset classes. And I think what they also are seeing is the part where lots of people are lacking out. And with the reference to MiCA that I will come back to as well, stablecoins, i.e. a token that is pegged towards ordinary currency like the US dollar or euro or a Norwegian crown or whatever. And, the settlement volumes of transactions in general in the world last year, Amex, they had $1.1 trillion US dollars. MasterCard had around $2 trillion US dollars in settlements, while all stablecoins, privately listed stablecoins, and mainly that is USDC and also Tether, they had $7.4 trillion US dollars. They were only beaten by Visa, who had approximately $12 trillion.
Okay.
And if this development continues, stablecoins will pass Visa in volumes as well in settlements this year. And think about that's also why I think some of these actors are seeing this momentum and why it has been in the MiCA that you are, as a suggestion, just allowed to issue stable coins and do transactions up to a certain threshold, because they fear that, could USDC or Tether take over for a euro? That's definitely something that the European Central Bank doesn't want. But still, the banks, they clearly see, if we can use this railway, governments are using this one, privately issued stable coins, it's something that has to live all together. So I think what people in general and the governments also are missing out on is how the world is looking today, with all the noise from the geopolitical side, that all depending on which hat you are wearing on your head. You can say it's horrible that you cannot send money from Norway to a conflict area. Or someone will say it's very fine. It all depends which hat you are wearing, because some players needs to be able to send money into Russia and take it out legally. Like we have fishing industry in Norway who legally can be here from Russia, but they cannot spend their SWIFT money. Then they have to spend something else. And by that, you see, we have a need in the world, how it is today, for cryptocurrencies, privately issued stablecoins, and CBDCs. And I think we need to create a framework where all of these things are able to interact with each other, all depending on the need and everything. We have to have the AML, we have to have the KYC part, but we have to be open enough to say, if we get a CBDC, we don't need crypto anymore, like many people are saying. And that's just nonsense. Why aren't we using then the yuan of China now, everyone? Because it's politics. Why will not everyone use the euro? Because the oil industry, for example, they will only use a e-dollar because that's their preferred currency. So we will always have a mix and a bundle here. And that's where I think we rather need to shape our heads also towards the governments, that they need to understand that this landscape is much more complex than just call it some far right-sided anarchists who wants to live in an anonymous world and just use Bitcoin for everything. It's rather something of a momentum where the use of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies has a function and an element in a railway where necessarily the ordinary fiat system doesn't work, and where also governments can use it, just like the United Nations are using stablecoins for refugees, for example. Just take one example.
Yeah. No, I think, this is what you said is really, really interesting. I mean, at the time when MiCA was created, do you think this type of conversation happened, or it was just simply? Yeah, exactly.
I'm 100% sure that no one has discussed this one, and I don't know everything, of course, but from all the meetings, the meetups, the conferences, the closed meetings, from the forums that I have been invited to, the closed forums with criminal police, secret police towards the United Nations, where SAC is part there, governments all over the world are part from either United Nations side or Interpol side, or we are members of OECD, the Blockchain Observatory Forum. I have one of my team members who is part of the fintech expert group for ESMA as well. So we have quite good overview of what has been done here.
Yeah.
And there's no talk about it. It's rather they saw noise in the 2017 market that can affect, call it the stupid consumers. We don't want people to be fooled into something. High volatility, rug pulls, frauds, all of this element. We see professional investors want to go in there. We see big actors like, Nike, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Adidas.
Yeah, it looks like MiCA could be perfect, not for startups, but for established players.
Exactly.
That's what I hear, Yes. So really interesting. So this is where the game is, because what you said, I think, I completely agree with you on the stablecoin. I think this is effectively a killer app, which nobody is saying, but it's like, if you say that there's such a trust in Tether, and we know what is Tether, right? It's for Christ's sake, I wouldn't put $1 there.
You know what? If call it shit had hit the fan really hard, and even harder for Circle when they were in this position some month ago, where their stablecoin was worth or traded for 80 cents instead of $1.
We actually bought at that time, we sold our Tether and we bought
exactly.
USDC.
You need to do the arbitrage there very
well. 20%. I think we did 10%, at the end, but it was 10% in 7 days, which was brilliant,
yeah. But think about it. If something had happened and they had a higher exposure, or they were exposed to two banks like this one, like Silicon Valley Bank, and suddenly it had not been 80 cents but 40 cents instead of, and it can just overnight collapse.
Yeah.
And then what would the world have had then? Well, just like you said, we would have had Tether. And still Tether, no one has been able to audit these guys. And the volume is still up there just because mainly of Asia and China, who's using that as a method to send money back and forth. Yeah. So that's also why I think we will see more coming up, like you said, from the private side, that of course players like Circle, they very welcome MiCA, because now finally they could put even more trust into their product. Yeah. That's what's needed for players who is using this one for different various actors and purposes. So yes, they have the money to pay for advices and everything, so they will be all fine. So I think, just like you said, we will see MiCA be good for institutional investors and the well-established parties, like I mentioned, all the Web3 companies that is in the space in some kind of way. But for the core innovation part and the builders and the others, I see quite a lot of obstacles and hurdles on the way.
Yeah, it's going to be UK and Ukraine.
Yeah.
All right, Magnus, this was brilliant. I really like it. So thank you very much for this, and thank you very much for your work in this space for such a long time, and actually keeping the knowledge. Because my worry is that there's so many people who are like moving from Big Four to, let's say, to the industry, then back, and there's no knowledge actually being built up. And what I hear, I think many of the things that happen in Norway happen because of you. That's what my feeling is here. So
no, but as just on the side in the end, I can also mention that one thing that I really salute to the example Norwegian authorities from, and that's something that I think authorities, regardless of where you are in the world, should pay notice. And what they have done is that, first of all, not many people knows that these guys, they started clustering cryptocurrencies back in 2012. And still, when they started so early, they have built up a competence. So they came to me in 2018 and said, Magnus, what's happening with this DeFi thing? What's this make a DAO thing going on in Denmark? How do we tax this shit? Tell me. They understood it. Well, when I am having workshops now with Danish tax authorities, they're saying, Magnus, we're in the middle of nowhere in Denmark. We're 4 persons here. We have no resources, not the tools, not the competence. We have more than enough to just follow buy, hold, sell mechanisms of crypto. We're not interested in your talks about how to tax a DAO. It's way above our head, way about our competence. What about we have been delegated? Compared to Norwegian authorities, who is saying, hey, this moves so fast. We understand the complexity about cryptos, CBDCs, privately issued stablecoins. It will be there. They believe in it. They understand it. So they have said, let's talk to the market instead. So if I call them up, they will answer, because they always know that I and other advisors, we bring in the latest of the products, so they can learn from it. So I never waited more than 1 day to have a meeting with them. And by that, we can also get clarity compared to, like you said, try to call HMRC. You will have to wait 12 months now to get a meeting with them only, if they want to talk to you at all. So I think that's also an element where governments should be in general more open to dedicate at least a small group. Like in Norway, it's only 7 persons, but still, then that group gains lots of hardcore knowledge about stuff. So they can easily interpret things. They talk the same language. We can go in and have deep DeFi mechanisms discussions. And like we have said, one example from the UK, X, Richard Hart's project. That's very complex. And how do you do the staking and other stuff? What have you been promised? These type of things is the core thing that they need to go into. Otherwise, we'll just see the history repeat itself. It will be retrospectively. like we see now, 2017 markets. Famous persons in the US being convicted by US governments for something they did back, and history will repeat itself. Regardless of MiCA or not, 2, 3, 4 years going ahead, that thing that happened now, you will have to be liable for starting the DAO, for doing the DeFi services, for everything.
100%.
So I think it's a very important element and message to send out to governments. Be more open to have a dialogue with the market from the core advisors that are in there, because that's how we can actually learn and build this landscape together. Because we are in there not to charge governments for this one, but to build this landscape and build the competence, and in that way bring clarity to the whole ecosystem, which is also for the benefit of governments and not only private, allegedly anarchistic people who wants to do fast money on some shitcoin.
100%. And I need to reach out to you because on this company register, you need to send me info, because that sounds really interesting. And it's something that we are also building and see huge opportunity in Gatenox, so definitely we need to touch on this.
Absolutely.
Listen, Magnus, thank you very much for this. That was excellent.
Likewise. Thanks for having me, Pawel.
Crypto Compliance, brought to you by Gatenox.